Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Nurse Boss Chick. It's your girl, Dr. Kiana Jones.
And I'm Crystal P, the Hormone MP.
And this is the beginning of 2025.
Yes.
At the time of this recording, we're only a couple of days in, and I feel like it's been a year.
Right.
So I'm super excited because we have a special guest, Miss Walli Miller, who is Crystal,
My financial coach.
And she's going to come in here and drop some tea for us. But before we get started, Walli Miller, can I refer to you as Mrs. Miller? Walli, how should we?
Walli is just fine. I don't need, the Mrs. makes me feel old.
You too. Okay. Well, we have Walli on joining us, you guys, and we are super excited because we always talk about fiscal responsibility, and it is something that Crystal and I are working towards, being financially astute and to get our literacy up. So Crystal is going to take the lead on this since this is her financial coach, and I'm just super excited to be here, Walli, because I need help too.
Right.
So I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity as well. But if you could just really quickly introduce yourself for our listeners, just kind of let them know a little bit about your background, pop your collar a little bit.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for having me. I love talking all things money. I know not everybody nerds out about it, but I definitely do. And I'm super excited. This is the first time that I am on a podcast with one of my current clients. I've had a couple of podcast hosts afterwards who are like, I'm going to work with you. So some of my clients have been former podcast interviewers. But, we don't really learn much about finances, right? So we can go through high school, college, specialized programs, and we don't really necessarily talk about a lot about finances. And I think it's something that we want to make a little bit more commonplace, right? Even talking about how much you make and how much you spend and, what your expenses are can really feel taboo, right? We don't really talk about money at all. And I want to make conversations around money a little less taboo. And yes, there's the financial literacy and financial education piece, but it's something that I think we just need to first understand and then normalize the conversations. And so my name is Walli Miller. I am a Latina, first-gen college graduate, daughter of an immigrant, born and raised in the Bronx. And I'm also a first-gen millionaire. And when I say that, it doesn't come lightly. It took me a while to feel really comfortable saying it. And sometimes I'm still like, what do people think that means? But it's something that I think it's really important to share because I want people to understand that it doesn't have to be so hard to get there.
Yeah, for sure.
So how did you segue into, if you could tell us a little bit about more about your story as far as work optional, that's kind of your tagline, and how you got to that and how you were able to make work optional for yourself.
Yeah. So, kind of going back a little bit, I wish I could say my parents were investors and they taught me how to invest money and they told me how to build wealth. No, I grew up in the Bronx and I was a low income household, or we were a low income household. And I was, one of 5 kids. So my mom stayed at home, my dad worked, and we didn't really have conversations around money. So what I learned about money was really sort of like things that I observed and absorbed. And that's generally the relationship for most of us. Like, unless you have a parent or the people who raise you, like, sit you down and show you what a checkbook is and how to open a bank account. Like, that just wasn't my story. And so fast forward a couple of years or a decade, right? Like, I got into my 20s right out of high school. Well, I went to out of high school, I went to college, and then I got my first like grown up job, and I wasn't making a lot of money at the time. It was like barely enough to pay for things like paying for a car and paying my student loans. But really shortly thereafter, my increase like doubled and I started earning a little bit more money. And I knew that it was really important to pay your bills on time, right? So that was something that I like picked up. Like, if you don't pay your bills on time, you can have like the cable cut off and the light turned off, right? So I knew it was really important to pay your bills on time. But then I was like, okay, I have some money left over. Like, what do I do? And that question, no one, that just wasn't a situation for me growing up. My parents didn't have money left over. And so I said, okay, I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to pay my bills. And then I just spent every dollar that was left over.
Right.
And it was like I just didn't know what to do. And thought I was being good with money because I knew people who weren't able to pay their bills. And I was like, okay, I'm able to pay my bills. And so in my mind, I just kind of lived life like that. And so the more money I made, sometimes my bills got a little bit higher. You upgrade your car, you upgrade your expenses, but I made sure to pay my bills.
Yeah.
And then my lifestyle just increased, right? So the amount of money that now I was spending on traveling and eating out and what I would call self-care, right? Just started to sort of increase.
Yes.
Wow.
And yeah, so I did that for a while. And one day I really got into a field and a job that I loved. I worked in public service for many, many years. And it was sort of an ideal job and it was good paying. And I remember loving it until things weren't so ideal. We probably have all experienced that at one point. And the boss that I loved, he left. And when he left, a lot of things changed. And my ideal job turned a little bit toxic. And then I felt stuck. And I just wanted to say, you know what? I don't need to take this. I'm out of here. And I realized that if I did that if I missed one paycheck, definitely two paychecks, that I would lose everything that I worked hard for. And I realized I didn't really have a lot of options. And that's when, you know, sort of the realization of like, you make good money, but you don't really have anything to show for it. You don't have many options kind of settled in with me. And I knew something had to change, but I wasn't sure exactly what.
Can I just say, I really can relate to the extra money and spending it. And even the word investing in my 20s, I don't even think I understood what it meant to invest. And I didn't even know that there was like, I think probably recently, the last couple years, I've really started to even understand like the stock market and what it is.
Like actually, I'd be like a stock professional.
Yeah, like you have to be on Wall Street. Like, and so, you know, I started college. I consider it later because I was like already 20 when I started. But so when I did graduate and I did start making money, it was like you said, I think it's such a middle class thing to like pay your bills for sure. And it's really, you're affording things that you're buying things that you really can't afford, but you can get on good credit. Right. So you're like, so when you said leveling up your life, I'm like, I totally get that too. So at what point, and I'm just trying to think about if I had a you when I was in my 20s, like, and at what point, based on your experience now, would you say you should start? Like, do you have to have a certain amount of money or?
Yeah, I will even take it like one step back, right? Because at this point, I wasn't thinking about investing. To me, there was no difference between investing and gambling. That was like sort of my understanding of it. I was like, when people leave the casinos, they're crying, and there's people who invest and they cry too. So like, what's the difference? So to me, there really wasn't a difference. And, I remember reading this article, and it was about a couple who was in their 30s who had retired early to travel the world. And I remember reading this article, and it was very clickbaity. So I clicked on it, read it, and then I sent it to like my then fiance, now husband. And I was like, wow, this is like really cool. And I remember reading the article and I was like, what are they doing that I'm missing? Like, what is going on here? And one of the concepts that they introduced was this whole thing of building wealth. And I could not relate to that word at all. Because to me, wealth, I pictured an old man smoking a cigar in a velvet robe, right? I was like, I'm not an athlete. I'm not an artist. I don't sing and dance. Like, what is going on? Like, I just couldn't even relate to that word. But they talked about building wealth by building wealth. And I was like, okay, well, how do you build wealth? Like, that was my first question. I was like, well, how do you do that? Right? Like, what does that mean? And that was when I then dug into, there are multiple ways of building wealth, right? You can build wealth through investing in the stock market. You can build wealth through real estate. And then you can also build wealth through entrepreneurship. And they all have their advantages and disadvantages, right? Entrepreneurship, you don't really need any money to get started, but you need a lot of time and sort of like mental bandwidth to get started with entrepreneurship, right? Investing in real estate. Yes, right, exactly. So you guys talk about this all the time.
Lord.
And then with real estate, it's a fantastic way of building wealth, but you need money to get started investing with real estate, right? When we think about let's just talk about traditional real estate, like buying a home and then renting it out and somebody pays you rent. It's like, okay, well, you need money to buy that home. You need money to buy that apartment. You need money to buy that Airbnb, right? So, but most people understand the idea of like building wealth through investing. You buy one house and then you buy another house and then you buy another house. But the level to entry, like the barrier to entry is a lot higher because you need more money to do that. But it is, this is one of the proven ways of building wealth. Mm-hmm. And then there was this third way, investing in the stock market. And that, again, I didn't understand what that necessarily meant because no one I knew was an investor. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, I don't know any entrepreneurs. I don't know anybody who owns real estate, but I kind of understand that a little bit. But like, what's this whole investing thing? Mm-hmm. And what I realized was that I was already an investor. I just didn't know it. Mm-hmm. And many of us might be if, for example, you have something like a 403B or like a 401k. Mm-hmm. Now, doesn't sound sexy. Right? Like most people will ask me, how do I get started investing? And I'm like, well, do you have a workplace retirement plan? And they're like, yeah, no. But like what I mean is, and I think the idea that most people have is like having 3 screens, reading red and green lines, reading charts and all this stuff. And it's like, that is a way to invest. But it doesn't have to be that complicated. And one of the ways that I like to work with my clients on, and I just like to challenge people on, is that what if investing was simple? And also, what about if you could do it the lazy way? Yeah. And I like investing in the stock market because of that. Now, I have real estate and I am an entrepreneur, but building wealth through investing is one of the easiest, most laziest ways to build wealth, and it is proven.
And I wanted to ask, because I think that's a big point of nurses. We usually have a 401k, especially if we're a staff nurse somewhere. So how does one start investing with the 401k that they have? Because I think, like you said, that's the easiest low-hanging fruit, lazy way. So how because most of our listeners are nurses. So how could they start investing with their 401k that they already have?
Yeah, I love this question. One of the things that we need is money to be able to do that, right? So we really want to understand what is our income, what is our expenses. And when you take your income minus your expenses, whatever is left over is what you're going to use to build financial security and then build wealth with it. Right? So it's really important to kind of go to basics. If we try to put money into the stock market without understanding how money is coming in, how money is going out, we're really not going to have that money left over in order to build wealth with, right? So like sort of like step 1 is really understand how money is coming in and how money is coming out. Then we want to understand that there's going to be some money that is, we want it to be easily accessible to us. And this is what we would call like a savings account or an emergency fund, right? This is if my car breaks down and I have a $700 car repair, I don't have to put it on a credit card. I can take this money out and use to pay for those unplanned expenses, right? If I'm planning on going on vacation in 3 months, I know that that money is secure. It isn't going anywhere. It's just sitting in a savings account, right? So there's like those 2 pieces that we first want to understand. Now, after that, I really like people to think about investing, particularly in their 401ks and 403bs, or if you're a government employee, maybe you have something called the Thrift Savings Plan, a TSP. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why I always focus people to go there, especially for higher income earners, is because of the tax benefits that it provides. It's not sexy, but it is so important that the more money you make, the more you begin thinking about reducing the expense of taxes. Now, especially if you live in a high tax state like California or New York, it's really important to think about, okay, I like to use this acronym, which is think about the fat. Okay. And it's FATT, and it's focus on expenses on food. So we're talking about grocery bill. We're talking about dining out. We're talking about Uber Eats. We're talking about DoorDash. Like, think about your food expenses. That's the F. The A is accommodation. So we're talking about housing, utility bills, right? How do you keep a roof over your head? Then we talk about the T, transportation costs, right? Do you need a $7,000 a month car payment, or are you good with like a $400 a month car payment, right? And then the second T, so it's FATT, is taxes. If we can focus on keeping those expenses low or lowering those expenses, then we can have more money left over to be able to build wealth with. So why do I recommend, in addition to taxes, the 401ks or 403bs? One is because you will get an almost instant return on investment. And so that means that if you put $1 in, there are some employers who will match that money. So we may have heard this as like a company match. Mm-hmm. So if you put $1 into your retirement account, they might match the first $1, the first $5, the first $10, right? So we want to see whether or not our employers have 401k matches or 403b matches, right? That is free money. And a lot of people, actually, I don't even want to say it's free money. This is the way I want people to think about it. This is part of your compensation package. So imagine you saying, I'm not going to put money into my 401k because I don't know if I'm going to retire. I don't know what that is supposed to be doing. You're essentially saying, yeah, you know that 5% raise that you were going to give me? Nah, I don't want it. And you're essentially saying no to part of your compensation package. So I want people to just ask the question, talk to your HR, your human resource or payroll department and ask them if you have a workplace retirement account. And if the answer is yes, ask what the match is. And at the very minimum, you want to be able to put as much money as they're matching. So if they say we're going to put 5% of your salary in, you want to put 5% of your salary in, because that is an instant return on the amount of money that you're setting aside for a future need. And in this case, it would be retirement.
That's good. So, okay, I heard you mention that you started in stocks, right? That's your, are you saying that's your preferred route? I know you said really you have real estate as well, but is that your starting point? Like when you first started to generate wealth, is that where you started in the stock market?
Yeah, when I first realized, when I understood that building wealth just required an investment vehicle, that was the way I started. Now I have some other wealth building vehicles as well, but that was where I started. I just didn't understand that I was already an investor because I had a 401k.
Okay.
And so what I recommend people to do is to begin to understand what your 401k is capable of. When we're talking about, yes, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so what I'm hearing is they should start with the low hanging fruit. It's like, a lot of people think you have to have already money set aside. And I know you mentioned about just like really knowing what's coming in and what's going out. But even before then, if they have a 401k or some type of investment retirement account, they're already in it. So start there. So it's not even really affecting whatever money they have or don't have, because they're already investing in that. So at least start there. And then from there, go to the other vehicles, as you say, on like, if you want to do stock, real estate, whatever. But that's sounds like the low hanging fruit, because as nurses, most nurses have some kind of retirement account. Now, whether it's just a 401k or 403b and all the other ones, but they do have something. So you're saying like, start there. It's like,
start there. And also think about ways to contribute more. Right? I like to challenge my clients to increase the amount that they're putting into their 401k 1% every year. Increase it by 1% every year. So if you are contributing 5% right now, try 6% next year. And then if you really want to challenge, do 1% every quarter. Increase the amount of contributions you're doing that every quarter, because any money that you put into your 401k, not only could you get the match, not only can it be invested, but also it will help reduce the amount of taxes you pay. Like literally the IRS incentivizes people by paying less taxes if you put more money into your 401k. So you're either going to be paying $10,000 to taxes, or you're going to be paying $10,000 in a retirement account for yourself that you can use later on. And I don't know about you, but I definitely would rather pay myself, be setting money aside for myself in order to be building that. One thing that I will say though, because this is a huge mistake that I see, is that people will contribute to a 401k. Amazing. But they don't realize that putting money into a 401k and being an investor is a two-step process. The first step is contributing to that account. The second is actually choosing the investments. And so many people will have money going out of their checks. And we've heard stories of people like doing this for 10, 20 years. I made this mistake. I was like, oh yeah, they always pull money out and they put it into my 401k. Yeah. I had no idea that it was just sitting there in essentially a holding account or a savings account, and it was never invested because no one ever told me this. So that's going to be like my next challenge to you, is that if you have a 401k, increase the contributions that you do by 1% every year. And if you're overly ambitious, try to do 1% every quarter. But then the next thing is to make sure that that money is actually being invested. It's the biggest mistake that people make.
It's so simple. It sounds so simple when you say it, but it feels, and now at the ripe age of 46, I really do feel like I've learned that, you don't want to give, you're like, no, that's going to take away X amount of dollars, but you don't even feel it. Like the truth, and especially 1%, like you don't feel it, but it's scary to put it in the market and you feel like it's going to affect your paycheck and, oh my gosh, I got bills and this is that. But you really don't feel it when you do it in incremental like investment, like a 1%, a quarter even. You're not going to feel that. And think about the waste that we already do.
Right. I was going to say, I used to hear, sitting at the nurse's station, nurses would talk about this, like their 401k and this and that. And I was just like, I had no clue what they were talking about. And actually, when you had mentioned, making sure that money is being invested, that I learned is that and also companies can not take your money, but when you put it in that 401k, they are deciding where they're investing your money. And then a thing that I learned from sitting at the nurse's station is that you can actually call them or go online and change where your money is going and how it's being invested into companies that you care about, or companies that may have a higher return than the companies that they're just automatically putting your money into. Is that correct?
Yes. And here's the thing, right? The plan administrators, so the 401k plan administrators, they're going to put you in usually probably like a mutual fund, which essentially means instead of investing in one company, it's a collection of investments or collection of companies, which are great. The mutual funds can be a really great resource. But they tend to put you in mutual funds that cost more money because they're salesperson. And whoever is managing that fund is incentivized to putting you in a high cost mutual fund. When in your program, in part of your investment benefits inside of your 401k, you may have some low cost options that don't need to be extremely conservative or extremely aggressive, or when we say aggressive, like risky, and you still get to meet your financial goals, right? And so here, I'm not even talking about investing in individual companies, because a lot of people will ask me, like, what should I invest? And the question that they're asking me is, what company should I invest in? And it's not necessarily about knowing which company to invest in, because if I knew, I would be like a bazillionaire, right? And like most people can guess, right? But it's just a guess. And you would need to know not only when to buy that company, but also when to sell. And so the way I like to think about it is, because we don't have a magic wand and we don't have a crystal ball here, one of the things that we can do is say, okay, what does the average of the stock market do? And this will kind of go into a whole stock lesson. And unfortunately, the financial industry makes this really complicated, but I'm going to make it in the most simplest phrase and the simplest way possible. Imagine going to a supermarket and you go down the cereal aisle and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many cereal options out there, right? There's so many different companies. But you say, I'm going to get some chocolatey cereal, and then I'm going to get some fruity cereal, and then I'm going to get some corn-based cereal, and then I'm going to get some wheat-based cereal. And you start putting this in your shopping cart and you're like, I have a variety of cereals. Okay, but you only have cereals. Where's the protein? Where's the vegetables? Where's the fruits? Where's the dairy? Like, all you have is a variety of cereal. And what a lot of people will want to know is which cereal is the best. And that's the wrong question. It's which foods are going to give me a balanced meal. And the way to answer that is by buying a whole shopping cart full of food, right? Going to the cereal aisle, going to the fruit and vegetable aisle, going to all the different type of food groups, protein aisle, right? And getting those different things. And it doesn't necessarily require sitting in front of a whole bunch of computers, like looking at all the different screens. These are already collected for us in something like a mutual fund, right? A mutual fund is just a collection of companies. And what you want to make sure is that that mutual fund has all of the different sectors and industries, right? You don't want to have all tech companies or all companies that are invested in real estate or all pharmaceutical companies or consumer goods, right? You want to have a whole collection, and we want to make sure that it's a very well diversified fund or very well diversified shopping cart. And it's like, well, how do I know what is the best shopping cart out there? And the one that I love talking about the most is we've all probably heard terms like the index, the NASDAQ is up, the Dow Jones is up, the S&P 500 is like, I don't know what any of those things mean. Here's the one thing to think about. The S&P 500 is the last two names of some dudes, Standard & Poor's. And they essentially said, you know what, we're going to make a list of the top 500 companies in America. That's it. So the S&P 500 is a index or a list of the top 500 companies of America. And what you could do is say, I want to buy that mutual fund that has the top 500 companies in America. And if a company that is on this list doesn't do well, it gets kicked off the list and the next one comes on. And guess what? You have done nothing. All of this gets done in the background alone. And so when we're looking at our 401ks, rather than thinking about, oh, should I get this type of mutual fund or should I buy this type of company? It's like, you know what? I'm just going to follow this list of the top 500 companies, because then there's about 4,000, it's like a little over 3,000 companies inside of the stock market. I want the best of the best. And this list or this mutual fund, this shopping cart has the top 500 things that are doing well. And it's self-cleansing. So if a company doesn't do well, it gets kicked off.
I love that. Well, we're already almost at time, but I feel like we've only tipped the iceberg, but I feel it was important, the whole 401k talk, because again, most nurses have that. And I feel I didn't know, about them investing in, like you said, it's one thing to put the money in there, but making sure that it's being invested. So I think it's very important, because that is a place where nurses can start to invest and study that a little bit more, being that they're already giving money towards it. I just wanted to ask you last, because we always talk about mindset here, and just as you mentioned earlier, just how we're when we're growing up, we take these things from our parents or, those around us, and how we view money. So I just want to ask you, and with nurses, we know that we have the whole mindset of we want more, we work more. They always need us. There's always another shift to work, but then we get burnt out, and then we have to deal with those consequences. So for those nurses who are doing that and they're getting tired, they're getting burnt out of working these shifts, and then also the people you coach, which are from different industries, what would you say are the biggest mindset shifts that you have to kind of tweak in people, and then give our nurses maybe some
actionable steps
actionable steps to changing their mindset when it comes to money?
Yeah, I think one of the things that people really underestimate is that we could know the things to do when it comes to our finances. I think most of us know that if we earn some money, we should set money aside a little bit for that rainy day. We all know that, but it's really hard to do. And we underestimate the amount of the amount of emotional and mental stamina that it requires if you've never built a healthy relationship with money. So there's the math piece, there's the adding and the subtracting, but that's like black and white. That's the simple piece. Understanding your relationship with money is totally different, right? Understanding why is it that we spend the way that we do? Why is it that we save the way that we do, right? Some people can hoard money and like they never spend money on anything because there's this extreme scarcity mindset, right? Then there's the people who are like, as soon as they have $1, like want to go out and spend it because they can't seem to like figure out, like can't seem to like hold the money. It's almost like it's burning through their hands, like they have to spend it. And really understand, what is our relationship with money? What has been your money story, right? Many of us didn't learn how to manage money. Many of us didn't learn how to deal with money from our past, right? We know from studies that our relationship with money is shaped and formed between the ages of 7 and 10. And so when we think about, okay, what was happening when I was around that age? Did somebody talk to me about me around money? Or was I just like seeing the people who cared for me, the people who I grew up with, like managing money, and how were they talking about it, right? Were they like spending no matter what? Were they worried about it? And a lot of those behaviors or a lot of those observations shape and inform the way we interact with money later on. And so what I really want people to kind of take away with this is to understand the type of relationship you have with money. Is it a healthy one? Is it one that you're like, yes, money will always flow to me. I can be responsible with money. I can trust myself with money. Or do you feel resistant to having it? Do you feel like if I don't spend it now, I may never have it again, right? Does it feel like sort of understand what your spending triggers are, right? Do you spend money to celebrate, or do you spend money when you're sad? Do you spend money when you celebrate because you're celebrating and you're sad and you want to feel good about yourself, right? Really understanding that relationship with money. And then with nurses in particular, right, where it's an incredibly challenging job. It can be incredibly rewarding, but there's a lot of yourself that you give. So many times we will want to spend our way to feeling better. And I would say, let's understand the underlying issue of what's causing the need to spend or to hoard money, right? And what is it that you want to do, especially if you're making good money? Like, let's take care of those wants and needs that you have right now, but let's not forget that you want to prepare and take care of you 10 years from now, 15 years from now. And Crystal, you had asked me about this whole idea of being work optional. So my story is that I worked in public service, and once I learned how to build wealth, I was able to build enough wealth that I was able to leave my 9 to 5, and I became work optional, meaning that now I live off of my portfolio. And so my investments in my 401k, my investments in my IRA, my investments in the stock market outside of those workplace retirement accounts allow me to pay my bills now. And so I work now. I have a financial coaching business. I work now because I want to, right? And there might be a time that I may not want to. And I work because, as little or as much as I want, right? Like really, I'm exercising that word work optional. And what I want people to walk away with is that being work optional is available to you if you have a financial plan, right? Whether that is like, okay, I don't imagine working at my same job until the age of 65. Well, let's create a plan so that you make working optional, right? So that you have a financial independence plan. And financial independence just means you have a nest egg, you have a portfolio that you could live off of. And if you wanted to, it's there for you. But if you want to be work optional, if you want to retire early and like say, you know what, I'm never working again, fine. I think most people, that's not like the goal is not to like retire at the age of 40 and like do nothing for the rest of their lives. It's really about working on the causes and the things that we truly love and are passionate about. And being work optional just makes that, and reaching financial independence just makes that dream possible. We just need to create that financial plan.
I love that. I think it was so great to have, especially at the top of the year, so people can start thinking about, how they want to plan this year and make this year different for them financially. So if you guys are looking for a financial coach, I would definitely recommend Walli. You, thank you so much for working with me and my mindset issues and working them through. I feel like I'm so slow. Like, girl, save $1. Like, what is the problem? So I thank you, but you have really shown me that it is possible. Because you always hear about it, is like, yeah, but that can't happen for me. But really just seeing, if it's $50, just save it. After a year of saving $50 every week, you will have a lot to show for it versus saving nothing. So thank you so much. And thank you for being on the podcast. Any other questions?
No, I definitely love this conversation. I will say that, a lot of time, especially for nurses, we like to see our money right away. Mm-hmm. And so we need to also, I think what I'm taking away from this too is just like, remember the long-term goal and not just like right now, short-term gratification, which is what we a lot of times do focus on. We work hard, we get a check 2 weeks later versus like this could be down the line, especially when you talk about S&P 500, like that doesn't happen overnight and the learning that goes with it. But I know that it's an unlearning too that has to happen. Yeah. Yes. We didn't get this way in a year, right? It took 30, 40 years. Right. So give yourself some grace and know that it's going to take some time. Yeah. And so,
and I think like you told me once, Walli, just having a plan, and because I used to hear about nurses maxing out their 401k. I'm like, how am I going to do? You pay $2,500 a month to your 401k. Like that's 25 you don't have. But just having a plan and like you told me, once I start having that plan, it won't feel like I have all this free money to just go blow everywhere. If you have it as a bill, what you're investing is technically a bill, then you won't feel like you have all this money and you'll actually know where your money is going. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel like we're going to end up having another part of this.
For sure.
Because this it's too much. We haven't even touched like, okay, well, how do they start in the stock market? Yeah. Like, what is it? We haven't even touched any of that.
Financial correspondent.
Yeah, exactly. We need more. Yeah. But thank you so much, Walli. It was so informative, and I just know that we barely touched the surface. It's a long road, nurses. Yes. Because I also want to explore like what that looks like when you're starting a business too. Because like, how do you save and you're investing? And I'm sure you have a strategy for that too. So we'll touch on that. Last for me is just, do you have a book? Avid reader, do you have a book that you would recommend where they start at? I know there's you have Budgetnista, she has one. Like I know a lot of, but do you have one in particular that you're like, this is your point A, do you have a book that you recommend?
Oh, I have so many great books. And I think in the recent 4 or 5 years, we have so many women of color in particular who are writing books. But the book that really transformed my life to make understanding investing and building wealth over time so simple was a book by a white dude. But it's a very thin book, and he wrote it for his daughter. So it's very his daughter did not want to hear him talking about finances. So he wrote this book, and it's called The Simple Path to Wealth. And it's by an author named J.L. Collins. And it was the book that really made me understand what are the simple steps that I could do right now to build wealth. And it does start with that 401k, which again, doesn't sound sexy when you hear other people talking about. But the reason why we always go to that is because you get the benefits of paying less in taxes. So
yeah, love it. Okay.
Well, yeah. Everything will be linked in the show notes of how to contact Walli if you're interested, or just binge all of the different podcasts that she's on. Don't forget her. Yes. Don't forget to share this episode with a friend. As I say,
share the episode, and we'll also have all of your contact, your LinkedIn. I'm sure you have LinkedIn and all of your social platforms. You guys, we will hopefully get Walli back on here if she's not busy enough sometime this year to dive into other aspects. So if you have a specific topic that you want to talk about when it comes to financial literacy or anything, just make sure you guys comment that in the notes, or if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you put it in the comments on YouTube. So Walli, thank you so much. Guys, make sure you share. Don't gatekeep.
Yes.
All right. We're trying to get us into our bag in 2025. Thank you so much, Walli, for joining us. And thank you guys for listening. Until next time.
Bye.